Welcome to Two Millennials and Mom, where we bring you engaging conversations and respectful disagreement across the social spectrum.
Injected with the quirks of everyday life.
Curl up as we navigate the complexities of this modern world with all the humor and warmth we can muster.
And the occasional gentle ribbing. We're glad you're here. Happy listening.
How often do you hear someone, whether it's in person or online, say something really awful and then immediately pull the "haven't you heard of freedom of speech" card? Like it's some kind of magic shield that protects you from being held accountable for being terrible. But that's not really how it works, right? Somewhere along the way, we've mistaken the freedom of speech for this all-purpose excuse to say anything to anyone, anywhere, without any consequences. And spoiler alert, that's not actually what it means, like at all. So today we're discussing what freedom of speech really is, why people keep getting it wrong, and how social media made this whole thing about 10 times more confusing.
So, legally speaking, freedom of speech means the government can't punish you for expressing your opinions. And that's about it. It doesn't mean that your employer or your followers or the internet as in general has to like what you said. And that's where things get messy because in our culture today, we treat free speech like it's this blanket permission slip to say whatever we want with no fallout. But the First Amendment wasn't really built for TikTok comments and X rants. It was written in a world where speech really kind of just meant pamphlets and talking to other people, maybe in a town square, not viral posts and algorithmic outrage. So what happens when that 18th century idea collides with 21st century technology? And how do we decide what freedom of speech looks like in a world where everyone has a megaphone?
Not all that many years ago, freedom of speech meant marching for civil rights or protesting a war, empowering citizens, standing up to power. It didn't mean storming into your HOA meeting, screaming about mask mandates, and then crying censorship when someone tells you to sit down. Somewhere between Woodstock and Wi-Fi, we turned freedom of speech into a get-out-of-trouble card for people who just don't like consequences. You'll see somebody lose their job for using racial slurs or saying something awful, and they're like, well, what about my First Amendment rights? The First Amendment doesn't cover bad behavior at the office. Now, it feels like every other week there's a grown adult having a public meltdown, yelling at baristas, refusing to leave stores, and then shouting, "I have freedom of speech," as if that's some kind of magic spell. No, ma'am. That's not free speech, Karen. That's you throwing a tantrum in the produce aisle. We've confused the right to speak with the right to be rude. The First Amendment doesn't promise you an audience, and it definitely doesn't mean private companies, platforms, or other people have to tolerate your nonsense. And that's the part we want to untangle today. How we went from speech as a tool for justice to speech as a temper tantrum defense, a catchphrase for entitlement. How did something so foundational get so misunderstood? And can we still protect the value of speech without letting it become a free-for-all?
We've confused freedom with license, the right to speak with the right to be reckless. Because if freedom of speech is supposed to protect democracy, we might want to remember that how we use it says a lot about the kind of society that we want to be. So we're starting at the beginning. What does the First Amendment actually say, and what does it really protect? Because spoiler, is a lot narrower and a lot more interesting than people realize. Welcome to Two Millennials and Mom.
I'm Callie.
I'm Cole.
Mom. So let's start with the text.
I think it's really fascinating, though. This is not some big, grand Shakespearean novel that nobody can understand.
Most of them aren't.
45 words, the entirety of the First Amendment that grants every single citizen of this country freedom of speech uses 45 words to do it.
Well, and not all 45 words are about the freedom of speech. There are quite a few things covered under the First Amendment.
Right.
But an individual's right to free speech is only part of it, because it's really freedom of religion, freedom of the press, and freedom of speech.
All wrapped in one amendment. So let's hit the full text.
Yeah. Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof, or abridging the freedom of speech or of the press or the right of the people peaceably to assemble and to petition the government for a redress of grievances. So what does that say to you?
It's between you and the government. It's not between me and Cole. It's not between me and my employer. It's not between me and my husband. It's between me and the government.
They can't send me to jail because I say, I don't like the way George Washington is running this place.
Right.
Yeah. I started to say to me that it's protection and an opportunity to speak up if you see something going wrong.
It's protection from government censorship. No, I don't like that you're upset that I, George Washington, am doing this differently than you would. I can't
Yeah.
do anything to you in those instances. It is
Yeah.
not about private consequences. I keep going back to the whole, I've seen several. Mom and I were talking about them the other day. There have been several instances of somebody going into a Starbucks and having their name written on the cup that is something different that is their name. I walk in and say, hey, my name is Charlie Kirk. And then when they don't call it out or they don't make this big scene the way that they would for Cole, your coffee's ready, then the person who has made this big scene about or is expecting this big scene causes an actual scene about this is my freedom of speech. No, Karen, it isn't.
Because Starbucks does have a company policy against that of kind of making it
Stirring the
not,
pot.
not stirring the
Well,
pot. And so if
regardless
that,
of their policy, free speech doesn't mean that you get to force someone else to say what you want them to say.
They're still a private establishment.
yeah, it's super interesting.
It
We've
is.
just lost the concept of what this is about and have made it just, I can do whatever I want to do. And that's just not right. And I just find it simply interesting because Cal, you had a conversation about if somebody says something negative to you and you don't like it, then but you
It's
you
a
aren't
two-way street,
yeah,
right?
you're not holding the same regards
Yeah,
to this.
it's a
You
two-way
can say
street.
something bad, but they
Yeah,
shouldn't say something bad. It
right.
doesn't work that way.
Exactly.
It doesn't work that way from siblings growing up together to coworkers or families. It just doesn't work that way. I mean, if we could go back to do unto others as you'd have them do unto you, it's a really, really good thought there.
So I think that a couple of real-world examples that are worth kind of running through here are helpful. I can sit here and tell my boss that they are an ugly person. That does not mean that they cannot fire me. They absolutely can. You can
I mean, that's a little bit state dependent because
it is
some
state
states it
dependent.
works a little bit different than others. But like in a right to work state,
I don't
they
like your shirt, you're fired is completely acceptable.
yeah, yeah,
Yes.
termination without cause is reasonable and not a violation of your constitutional rights, generally speaking.
Right.
Yeah.
We talked about Starbucks a minute ago. I'm going to switch this to the digital realm of everything. You can post whatever you want on social media, but that still leaves the platform itself the right and ability and opportunity to remove it. They have their own sets of rules, just like Starbucks does, just like everybody else does, that says, hey, we don't want this here. We're taking it off. That is not them violating your right to free speech. That is
Now,
you violating their community standards and guidelines.
this is a little bit of a tangent here, and I think we've probably talked about this some in the past. Regardless of the First Amendment and free speech, do you think those platforms have a responsibility, an obligation to moderate the speech on their platforms?
I think that's a really hairy question.
I do
Yeah. It
too.
comes down to who gets to decide what is good and what is bad.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, they obviously have the prerogative. It is up to them whether or not to moderate, but I think there's a big difference in a moral or social responsibility to moderate versus a legal obligation or
I agree.
responsibility to moderate.
Yeah, I agree with you on that.
Yeah, I would too. I
I mean,
mean,
do I wish that there was a way to draw a line there so that you didn't see some of the foulness? Yes. But, the theory is that it's really up to the participants to manage that. What's the word I'm looking for? That if I
moderate
do something
themselves.
to moderate themselves, if I do something that's wrong, then and here comes the problem. You can't just lambast me and say vile things back to me because you disagree with what I said. But there
I mean,
should
but
be
you
a
can't.
community. But there should be a community there that is willing to say, "Hey, you're out of line. You need to stop." And that be, manageable, but it isn't.
I'm trying to think, like, wasn't it? I think it was Telegram. And if that is not right, I apologize for getting it wrong and I will redact it and correct it in the show notes. But I thought it was Telegram that had all of these. So Telegram is a messaging app that all of those messages are encrypted and it was being used for various nefarious purposes. Hey, we're going to do like sending child pornography is still child pornography, even if nobody can see it. I think that there's an integrity thing there. But they had to come in and they've talked about how they're removing all of these messages and they're taking these down and they're closing these chat groups and all their that are being used for nefarious purposes that are being used to cause harm that like how does that work?
Yeah, so I mean, I have some pretty obvious comparisons that come to mind. If I take my truck and drive through a crowd of people, is the car manufacturer liable? Is the company that paved the road or the sidewalk responsible for my ability to do that? I mean, you're talking about Telegram being in hot water for having this encrypted communication channel. What if someone's mailing anthrax? Is the postal service now responsible for that because they are
Right.
the medium?
That's what I don't know. I don't know how that works. I don't know how you kind of decide on what your community guidelines are and police them in order to be profitable.
To me, there is a difference between a platform and somebody using a Ford truck to plow down people. There's a different, that could be any truck, anybody, and there's no connection with that manufacturer except for the driver. But there's a difference when you've made an agreement to be on a platform and that platform is monitoring things. And
But what I'm saying is you're just talking about two different vehicles, both physically and metaphorically speaking. You're using Twitter as your vehicle for spouting whatever it is you want to spout, just like you would be using the truck to run over whoever you want to run over.
And I
But
guess if we did an agreement with the truck that said we wouldn't
right,
run over people, that would be different. But we've done an agreement here.
Well,
correct.
you've also generally signed an agreement when you got a driver's license that you know how to operate the vehicle and you're not going to use it to intentionally harm people.
I don't know if that intentional harm is part of it, getting a driver's license. I can know the rules
Uh,
of the road and still
mm,
cause harm.
sure. And yeah, maybe so because I didn't sign an agreement that I'm not going to go on a murdering spree, I'm not I shouldn't be held liable if I do. It's a really
Yeah.
complex thing. I mean, I get it.
Yeah.
I think the whole thing is complex because I still think that, Cal, you mentioned child pornography. And where is the line between what is pornography and what is not pornography? And a lot of that is intention. And
Uh-huh.
it's really hard to assume someone else's intention. So if I turn that around and I look at a platform and somebody has said something, how do I distinguish what their intention was?
Well, I think that we have to be really clear, kind of looping this back to freedom of speech. There is a huge difference between your legal rights and your social responsibility, right? And
Yeah.
so I go back to the was it the ACLU? Wasn't it, Cole? That you had these Jewish attorneys who were defending Nazis and Nazi sympathizers not because they agreed with them, not because they liked what they said, but because they wanted to ensure their freedom of speech. And there's all kinds of, I mean, this was back in the late 70s. There's all kinds of research that has been done and interviews that have been done with some of these people saying, hey, what was that experience like? As you as a Jewish person, how was it defending Nazis who actively hate you? And it was really hard for many of them. But at the same time, it would have been that much harder to lose your freedom of speech. And so while I didn't agree with what it is that they said, I still took their freedom of speech very seriously. And so I think that we just have to be really cognizant of the difference between legal rights and social responsibility.
Yeah, because I mean, and this is really and truly the point of that specific clause of the First Amendment. If I take away your right to say something because I disagree with you right now while I'm in power, what happens when I'm not in power anymore? And the next guy who comes along, he now has the ability to restrict my freedom of speech and say that I can no longer say something.
Which I think is so much. I mean, then you loop the freedom of the press in there as well. And I think that for me, that's one of the things that I'm seeing and so nervous about what's going on in our world today, in our country today, with the government, whoever you want to call that, but the government restricting various media outlets from being allowed to be in the newsroom, from being part of these things, from having access to the firsthand information that's being given out and doled out, whether you like what it is that they're reporting or the way in which they're reporting it, that's still their right.
Well, it is their right to report on it, but it's not necessarily their right to be present at those events. Like, I get what you're saying, and I am 100% behind the freedom of the press, but that does not mean that the government has to cooperate with the press. That just means that they can't punish them for being press legally.
But they are.
But isn't it
Well, are they
punishment to
prosecuting them for reporting, or are they just excluding them from the room? Because excluding them from the room is not prosecution. They're
Right.
not legally trying to hold them accountable for this thing. They're just saying, we're not going to cooperate with you.
I mean, you just had several big legal battles over various ways that news was reported that the administration didn't like.
I'm going to need some
And
more
that's,
detail
you
and
know,
context on that.
that's my fear, though. I don't want all of this to come down to having to go through a Supreme Court challenge. Not everything has to be litigated. I mean, some of this comes down to common sense and decency and non-discrimination.
You say that, but there's one, I don't know that common sense is super common right now.
Agreed.
So
Not going to disagree with you on that one.
there are going to be some instances where maybe we do need to, and maybe litigate is stronger of a term than I'm really looking for here, but maybe it does make sense to sit down and have that discussion like, hey, does this fit the bill? Is this part of what's covered and what's not covered, so that we know? And there's a ton of case law around the First Amendment, way more than we have time to get into today. But I mean, it's kind of like you said earlier, Callie, it's actually relatively narrow. It is, the freedom of speech is the freedom from punishment by the government, not the freedom from consequences.
That's a good point. I mean, we even talked about this earlier. The freedom of speech doesn't translate into the freedom not to lie or the freedom to lie. Some
Well,
of that is still.
in many cases, it does. There are absolutely lies that are protected, and there are some that are not.
Yeah.
Such as?
So, like, boasting about military honors is protected speech. Lies about the government or history are protected speech. False political statements are protected speech. These are generally there to ensure that the government cannot become the arbiter of truth. Because if you allow that to happen, like we've discussed in the past, just like I was referring to a couple of minutes ago, if my political party is in power right now and we get to determine what the truth is right now, and we can punish you for disagreeing with our truth, with the my truth of it. Well, when it comes back around and your political party is in power, they get to do the same thing. And that's not really very beneficial to society overall. But like, there are unprotected lies. So perjury. If in the court of law you are lying to a judge or a prosecutor or an officer of the court, that is not protected free speech. Defamation, using false statements to intentionally harm someone's reputation, is not protected speech. Fraud, so utilizing lies to harm someone and benefit yourself financially, not protected speech. And false reporting kind of falls under that same perjury, lying to law enforcement, which could lead to misdirected resources, is not covered by the First Amendment. But me saying, Mom, run outside, somebody stole your car, when nobody did that, is protected. The government can't punish me for doing that. You can, but the government cannot.
Yeah. And that's the big clue here, is what the government can do and not versus what an individual or a private organization can do.
Yeah. Again, it is not the freedom from consequences. There's the freedom from persecution by your government for your opinions.
Right.
So do you think we've handled this different generationally? I feel like we have.
I feel like we have, due to the tools at our disposal. I think that with the invention of the internet and with access to such a wider berth, a bigger platform, whether you have one follower or 5 million followers, the opportunity there for that digital speech is so much greater. And that has been utilized by essentially younger generations that are utilizing those tools. I think that it is different than it looked when you were a kid.
Yeah, for sure.
I think there's a lot more noise, right, wrong, or indifferent. There's a lot more noise because anybody can.
There's a lot more noise and there's a lot more meanness. And while I wish
I
that
just think that meanness is not disguised the same way. I think it was still there. I think it was still present. I think it was just less socially acceptable.
I think the percentage was a lot smaller. There was a minority, a very small minority. And now then it's the opposite of that. The majority has a level of meanness to it.
I don't think that it's that the majority has a level of meanness. I think that everyone has a microphone, everyone has a megaphone, and we can project that meanness much further than we ever have been able to before.
Okay.
Percentage-wise, I don't think it's all that different. I think Callie's right. I think projection-wise it is.
And that is really sad to me, that you are going to take your megaphone and use it for harm, use it to disparage people, use it to be cruel to people. But just because I think it's bad and I don't think it's right doesn't mean it's wrong. That is freedom of speech. And it goes back to what we were saying earlier. Freedom of speech has to be a two-way kind of deal here between us. I hope that you die sucks. And I think that that's a super shitty thing to say to someone. But allowing myself to say that to you, but not allowing you to say that back to me, it doesn't work that way. You can't have your cake and eat it too. You can't have your freedom of speech and not allow anybody else to have theirs.
If you can't take the heat, stay out of the kitchen.
Yeah. I'm really curious, do you guys think that free speech requires us to have thicker skin?
Well, I don't think it really requires us. And again, we're kind of applying that incorrect application here.
Yeah, I was thinking the same thing.
So, I mean, it goes right back to what we were just saying. If you can't take it, don't dish it out, for one. But again, not really free speech.
Right.
You can say whatever you want to somebody, but that doesn't mean that somebody's not going to turn around and smack you in the mouth. Not to say that they should or that they have the right to do so, but that's not going to stop a lot of people.
Yeah. Free speech is not freedom of consequences.
Yeah. And
So,
like you said, if I say something to you, but then say, oh no, you can't say anything back to me. So you're now infringing on their right to free speech if you think you're utilizing your right to free speech to say it in the first place.
but still, the whole point of this entire thing is it has nothing to do with what we say to each other. It has to do with us and the government.
I was waiting for that piece.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's really important. But I think that using that illustration is a really good way to point out to people who do interpret it or are interpreting it incorrectly that not only are you interpreting it incorrectly, you're not applying that incorrect interpretation correctly either.
Right.
So you're double wrong. Nothing's worse
Oh.
than being double wrong except for being triple wrong.
Oh.
Gotcha.
So let's jump into kind of the history of this. I think that is kind of interesting. So we need to go back to kind of the founding of this country. There was a group of people who did not want to be under British law and British rule anymore. And so the freedom of speech was written as a direct rebellion against the censorship laws that these folks were coming from.
Okay.
And I think that that's important to note, just that, hey, this is so important to us. We are going to put it in writing in our founding documents, in the Bill of Rights, so that we make sure that it's enshrined here forever. This is that important. So I think that that is really interesting. Cole, do we want to get into any of these other, you mentioned case law, do we want to get into any of these other topics?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it hurts to touch on them. I don't think we have to dive super deeply into them, but
Mm-hmm.
giving them a name and saying, hey, this is kind of what was established with these, I think is more than reasonable here.
Okay.
So lead us in.
I mean, you've got a note here for a really, really early one, which I don't know how, and I would probably need to go back and read a little bit more on this one in particular, but the Alien and Sedition Acts of 1798 apparently made criticizing the government illegal, which is a direct violation of the First Amendment. So that one,
So the Alien and Sedition Acts were a set of 4 laws passed by Congress in 1798 that did, you're right, make it illegal, make it a crime to criticize the government, and gave the president power to deport non-citizens. Those laws were then enacted at that time by the Federalist-controlled Congress under President John Adams, citing national security concerns during a period of tension with France. They included the Alien Friends Act, which allowed deportation of non-citizens deemed dangerous, the Alien Enemies Act, which allowed deportation of citizens of a hostile nation during wartime, and the Sedition Act, which criminalized false, scandalous, or malicious writing against the government. So I think it's kind of a little bit important to note that this was very, very unpopular at the time and contributed to the victory in the 1800 election when President Jefferson was elected and allowed those acts to expire, and then pardoned anybody who was convicted under those laws. I think that that's important to note.
Oh, that's
yeah.
interesting.
It
I
was
mean,
not at
because,
all popular, and people freaked out.
yeah, and it's a direct violation of the First Amendment.
Right, right.
So this is one, Schenck v. United States, is where it kind of sets the clear and present danger precedent. You can't yell fire in a crowded theater if there is no fire. That is not protected speech. Inciting hysteria or violence is not protected speech, which leads right into Brandenburg v. Ohio, a modern test. Speech must incite imminent violence or lawless action in order to be restricted. So those two kind of pair together fairly well. Yeah, I can call you an idiot, but I can't say, hey, everybody around us, let's go kill this idiot and crucify him in the town square without going through due process. That is a legal system that is required if you have done something wrong, not something that we can. There's no mob justice.
Right. Well, and the advocacy for violence is where it starts getting, nope, we're not
Yeah.
doing that.
So you made a point of saying there's a difference between I hope you die and I'm going to kill you.
Yeah, there is a difference between I hope you die and I'm going to kill you because one of them is a threat. I hope you die is, while it may not be the nicest thing to say to someone, isn't
I'm going
advocating
to
for
kill you.
violence.
Yeah, it's not the same thing.
And I have to say, in the past, I have wished that there were some type of law that would prevent you from saying, I hope you die, because I just think it's wrong. And yet, in looking at this in juxtaposition, understanding the difference there is really helpful.
Yeah.
So
It's really
now I'm
helpful,
just going
and
to
you
hope
don't
for
get to
moms
dictate
that'll
someone else's morality.
say that again, Boo.
You don't get to dictate somebody else's morality.
No, but I hope their mom smacks them.
Fair enough.
I mean, seriously, it. I just don't see any reason for saying that to anyone.
Yeah.
I just see zero purpose to that.
Well, and I think that that's a perfect lead into where I wanted to go next. There is absolutely a difference between free speech and hate speech. I think that that is something that we need to really, really, really
Yeah.
kind of, I don't know what I'm trying to say, hit home.
Well, try to explore a little bit because I mean, it's close but different.
Yeah, it is different. And so there is a legal threshold, which is very, very high, even when hateful speech is usually protected. I hope you die. All Jews are bad. Whatever that may be, they are not the same thing. And so I thought it was so interesting kind of talking about the definition of hate speech. And this was really helpful for me. So I think that it gets confused. The line between hate speech and free speech is blurred.
Mhm.
And I think that we need to go over that. So technically, hate speech is not actually defined or prohibited under US law. Not the same way that it is, especially in other democracies. It's more a cultural norm or a cultural kind of standpoint rather than a legal one.
A
So,
social versus legal.
yes, what?
And I found it interesting because you pulled up some information about other countries and their response to hate and that they had restrictions
Yeah,
that I thought was very interesting that, many of the other nations that we are closely associated with have restrictions on this, but we don't. And it's not that
right.
we haven't had bills presented. We just can't get one through.
Well, here's the thing. That's a really slippery slope. Because what happens when Nazis become the protected class? Now you can't speak out against fascism or Nazis because
So
it's
you
hate
think there
speech.
has to be, for hate speech, there has to be defined classes that would,
I mean,
So in the United
generally,
States,
yes.
currently, there are specific classes that are legally allowed. So hate speech is generally protected unless it crosses a line that, again, is threatening or inciting violence.
yeah,
So no matter how offensive or vile it may be, that doesn't change the fact that it is protected. So protected speech really truly is expressing hateful, racist, sexist, or bigoted opinions, even in public, is still allowed. You can get up on stage and say whatever it is that you want about any of these people or any of these groups. That does not mean that it is not the people who own the stage their right to come and pull you off. That does not mean that the government can come in and say, oh, nope, Callie was talking shit about so-and-so. We're going to persecute her. That speech is still protected. So think about it like a protester who's holding a racist sign or someone posting some xenophobic content online. That's all still protected speech so long as it doesn't threaten or incite violence. It's protected.
Yeah.
Now, unprotected speech is a little bit different. That's where you start crossing legal lines, right? So it has to be a threat. That would be a communication that is stating serious intent to harm someone. I'm going to kill you at a single person or a group of people, whatever that may be. That is unprotected speech. Incitement to imminent lawless action is also unprotected speech. So encouraging immediate violence or illegal behavior. Let's go burn down that synagogue. Let's go burn down that church. Let's go kill those people is not protected free speech. Harassing people, targeted, repeated behavior that creates a hostile environment, whether that's in your workplace or a school, can be seen as illegal under the civil rights laws because there are protected classes and protections in place for specific things that is not legal. Like Cole said, defamation or libel, false statements that damage someone's reputation is unprotected free speech. True or false, it's still unprotected.
Wow.
And then fighting words, direct face-to-face insults that are likely to provoke immediate violence.
Just
is
to back
also-
up real quick, it has to be false in order for it to be defamation.
Did I not say that?
You said true or false.
Oh, sorry. Thank you. No, definitely false. Yes. Saying somebody, you guys remember that commercial? I don't even remember what it was for, but it's like a brother and sister in the back seat, and one of them has their finger right up. I'm not touching you. I'm not touching you. I'm not touching you. It feels kind of like it's on that precipice of provoking violence, reaching up the other sibling, reaching up and smacking them out of the way. We cannot do things to provoke violence.
But it is so gray. I mean, you can get right to the line, and depending on the interpretation at that day and time of how that can come out, whether that goes to an illegal act or hate, it's almost scary.
It is almost scary. This is not a legal issue. They may be social or ethical issues, but they are not legal issues. So
Yeah.
when you're talking about all of these different groups, whether that is based on someone's race or ethnicity, whether it's based on their religion or their sexual orientation or their gender, their disability, their national origin, those are all things that you're technically allowed to say in the United States because they are not legal frameworks. They are social frameworks. They are ethical mindsets that I'm not encouraging those things, but it is still free speech.
I know, but again, it's right up to a line. It's almost as until you use the wrong verb. I mean,
Yeah.
that's what it feels like, kind of, to me.
Kind of. I hope you die. I'm going to kill you.
Yeah.
And I think it goes back to what you were talking about earlier. The intention behind that is really different.
Yeah. But I mean, our whole point here is that people are using the First Amendment to
As an
say whatever they
excuse.
want to say.
Mm.
And it will not protect you.
Right.
Well, here's the thing. It can protect you, but the only thing it can protect you from is the
Is
government,
the government.
not
Yeah.
each other.
Right.
Yeah. So you say something nasty to me, and if I want to sue you for that, then if that's libel or defamation or some of those things that we've outlined, then I have every right to do that.
You can, but also be aware that, generally speaking, the bar for proving defamation or libel is
I get it.
extremely high.
I get it.
Because you have the ability to do that, they're going to set that bar really, really high. That burden of proof is, generally speaking, extremely difficult to achieve.
So, Cole, do we just let people say whatever they want to say?
Yes. What else can you
No.
do?
I think that we can teach each other better. I think that we
Yeah.
can have conversations. I think that but even then, that doesn't change the law. That changes us
Right.
from a social standpoint. That changes us from an ethical standpoint. The law is still the law, which is why I asked that question earlier about, do you think that it creates thicker skin? I think that it should, because again, it's a two-way street. Hearing somebody come at me and say, I hope that you die, sucks. That's horrible, but they still have the right to say it, as much as I don't like it.
And is that what you mean about having thicker skin, that you're willing to take the abuse?
I mean, that's part of it, but I mean, going
Yeah.
back to what you're talking about here, Mom, talking about if you want to be able to say what you want to say, everyone else has to have that same ability.
But Cole, I also have um
Filter.
a filter. That's a great way of saying it. I have a filter, or I have a line that I'm not willing to cross.
Yeah,
You
but
will
you don't get to hold everybody to that same I mean, you can hold them to the
Yeah,
standard, but that
That's
doesn't
I
mean that
your
they're
can.
line.
going to or they have to live up to it.
Yeah. I
It's
I
your
guess I
line.
just wish that there was a social line that we all knew where it was and had to live by. It would be a much nicer place to live if we all did. And I get it. Not everybody was raised the same.
Well, not
Well, and
everybody
who
was
gets
raised the
to
same. Not everybody thinks that. Some people
Yeah.
think that the system in place that allows them to verbally abuse other people is to their advantage. So they don't want to hold other people to a higher standard
Yeah.
because maybe they're better at berating people than the people around them.
Well, and I think the really scary part is, Mom, who gets to draw the line?
Exactly.
Well, I'm just sitting here thinking, if you're in a marriage, that's called abuse. And you can put a stop to that, but you can't do anything about it if it's people who don't know each other. If it's just a random person and a random person. So
But
it's
really,
frustrating.
if you're in a relationship with somebody, you're married to somebody who's constantly saying, I hope you die, I hope you die, I hope you die, the court can't do anything about that. Freedom of speech or not.
You're right.
That is not legislatable.
And here's the thing. It's not up to the courts to fix that situation for you. It's not the government's job. It's yours.
Well,
Leave.
And the same thing is true on the reverse, right? If you're married to a person who keeps telling you that they're going to kill you, that is unacceptable. That is legislatable. In civil court, you can come in and say, hey, this is what they're saying to me. This is unacceptable. And that is all of this that we're talking about, that we can come in and say, nope, you're right. That's not right. We'll grant you that divorce. Get on with your life. Move it along.
I mean, saying I'm going to kill you is criminal too. And I mean, that's
Yes.
conspiracy to commit murder.
Yes. And to be able to prove that is a whole thing, because it's not just, oh, I have a text message that he said he wants to kill me.
Yeah.
It's all of the intent behind it as well. And we've talked about it on this podcast. We used to joke. I mean, Mom, how often would Cole or I pop off about something and you're like, I'm going to kill you, I'm going to smack you? And I specifically have started addressing that in my own vocabulary. I don't want to make those comments, not out of joking, out of fun, because I don't want there to be anything to be misconstrued or confused.
I hate that story from your growing up, from your history.
Yep, me too. But
Even though
so
I never, ever, ever made another step in that direction, saying it was wrong, especially to my children, or for that matter, my husband.
yeah, for sure. So let's kind of jump back on track here. So Mom, you talked about it. We did earlier, before we started recording, talk about a couple of comparisons of how the certain kinds of speech are criminalized in other democracies. So think of Canada or Germany or the UK. They do criminalize certain kinds of hate speech. So Germany, for example, bans public Holocaust denial and Nazi symbolism. Like, it's just a non-starter. The UK criminalizes speech that's intended to stir up racial or religious hatred. And then Canada's Charter of Rights allows reasonable limits on expression to prevent harm. And then you've got the US, on the other hand, who takes a more speech approach, believing that the best antidote to hate speech is counter speech, not censorship. And
I
so I think
agree.
that it's just a different take on it.
Yeah. Some of the stuff that I have heard that is allegedly going on in the UK right now around free speech is deeply concerning. People being jailed for tweets that are disparaging the government, be that local or state, if you will, government. Again, it's a big part of that really slippery slope
Yeah.
to say you can't talk bad about us. publicly. Because if you
Us, the
do,
government.
right, you can't talk bad about us as the government, because if you do, we're going to put you in jail. That sounds a lot like a gulag to me, which
Yeah.
is deeply concerning.
I mean, but on kind of again, on the other hand of that, there are lots of stories, and I understand that they're not citizens and they do not have the same rights that we do. But when you've got professors who are coming in to teach here for certain lectures or whatever and are being turned away at the border by our United States Customs and Border Patrol saying, no, you're not allowed here because of that tweet that you had criticizing our current president, that's the same slippery slope to me.
I don't really disagree with you.
It's just scary. And I think that that further shows why I think that we need to be educated in general, but certainly educated on what is and isn't free speech so that we can then keep track of ourselves better and keep track of the people around us better and be better stewards of what the intention with the First Amendment was and why.
Yeah.
It's hard.
It's hard.
There are definitely boundaries on free speech. I think that that's important to remember.
And the application of free speech, once again, is not intrapersonal.
You and the government. I just think that we have become a nation of people using freedom of speech as a shorthand for I can say whatever I want without consequences. And to me, that's a big red flag for a lack of education.
Yeah.
I mean, it's paper tiger. It doesn't mean anything.
No. And if you're actually fairly intelligent, you can see that they don't have any clue what they're talking about. That's ignorance.
Some people say that's bliss.
Well, then don't get all mad about it. But
I mean,
so we
the
need to
truth is,
remember,
though, they can probably still say whatever they want to say,
but they're not free of consequences.
but they're not free of consequences. They can say whatever they want to say, but they can't restrict whatever you want to say. So
Yeah.
if your barista doesn't want to call out Charlie Kirk's name on your
Coffee cup.
coffee cup, they can. And you
Yeah.
can't say anything about that either. And it's just,
Well,
it's
I mean,
not an
you
infringement.
can, but it's not
you
an
can.
infringement on your rights.
It's not an infringement. You can gripe about it, but they should be able to come back and say, that's our policy. We're standing by it. And we're standing by our barista. And that should be the end of it.
Mhm.
It shouldn't be a national news story.
So I think that we just need to remember that as an employee, you can absolutely be fired for making racist comments. That is not an infringement on your freedom of speech. Has nothing to do with you and the government. I think that we need to be cognizant that social media bans for hate speech or misinformation are still very much in place. If you go and start lying out there and you go and start attacking people on whatever social media platform and you get shadow banned or removed from those platforms, that's on you. You have guidelines that you have agreed to work within.
Yes, you have. But let's clarify something here.
I knew he wasn't going to
Twitter
let that one go.
Twitter can take my post down.
Yep.
But do you think it would be a violation of my First Amendment rights if the government went to Twitter and said, you better take this post down or there will be repercussions?
Yes.
Yes.
That's wrong.
Yeah.
That is a violation of the First Amendment, because it's not up to the government to do something like that, to get to set those terms. Now, well within Twitter's right to say, we don't like what you're saying, we're not going to make a platform for you.
The same story is if the government wants to prosecute you over something that you said, then where do you lie?
That's
What
between you
exactly?
and the government.
Yeah, that is between me and the government. And if I'm making tweets that incite violence, that's not protected speech.
But if I'm just saying, man, I don't like this administration,
And then they try
That-
and prosecute you, then you have a heck of a case that
then
will
I
be
have a free speech
Is protected
Yes.
speech.
national news story.
Yes. So I think we just need to kind of, again, clarify that misunderstanding. There are social or private consequences that take place in those instances when you're making racist remarks and getting fired, when you're being banned on social media for saying hateful things or lies. That is not government censorship. Government censorship is what is at stake and at play when it comes to the First Amendment, your freedom of speech. And I think that, we talked about this here several episodes again now, cancel culture and accountability. Those things can certainly run hand in hand. That does not make it free speech issues. I think that especially here in the last several years, freedom of speech has become this politicized weapon, this silver bullet, if you will. I can say whatever I want, but that isn't really true either. And again, it's not freedom of consequences. It's freedom of persecution from your government, so long as you're not inciting violence. Criticism, fine. Distaste, fine. Inciting violence is not protected.
I'm just
What was
sitting
that
here
face
thinking,
for?
Cole, we need more people like you who will stop your friend when he says something, when you will go back. We need more people who will do that and say, stop.
Yeah.
You're part of the problem. This is not free speech. Stop.
Well, no, but here's the thing. It is free speech. And he has the right to say those things.
It's not protected free speech.
Well, I mean, if you're
Because it
referring to the
isn't.
thing that I'm thinking about, it was.
I'm glad so-and-so died is still protected free speech. But
Yeah,
I think,
that's not.
again, what you're talking about, Mom, is community
Yes.
rules and setting those
What I'm
social
trying
rules
to.
for us and social expectations on top of the freedom of speech and the respect for the freedom of speech and what it actually is and means. That's a whole different layer to all of this.
Yeah.
That is not to be legislated. That is to
Correct.
be socially legislated amongst ourselves and our communities.
Yeah, you don't combat bad ideas by banning them or outlawing them. You combat bad ideas by presenting better ideas and saying and showing why the bad idea is bad.
Yeah.
Because if you start to legislate and say you can't have any bad ideas, well, who gets to determine what is a good or bad idea? That goes right back to that government becoming this arbiter of truth.
Right. And again, we have to remember in the United States, hate speech is not a legal term. It is only a social one. The First Amendment protects even the most hateful of opinions until they cross into threats, harassment, or incitement of violence. So while something can absolutely be wrong or harmful, that does not always mean that it's illegal. It just doesn't.
Stop
So,
yelling at your barista.
yeah, please. Gosh, or throwing soup on them or everything, all of these things. People are crazy. So I think that, we talked about social media platforms and that kind of having a cultural difference. I think that we need to recognize that those social media platforms of today are yesterday's quote unquote public squares, but at the same time, they're still privately owned. I think that that's really, really important information.
It's much more akin to a restaurant or a concert hall than it is to a public square.
Yes.
You can come into my restaurant as long as you are willing to abide by the restaurant's rules. You
Yeah.
can come into this theater, but if you start to heckle the people on stage, we might kick you out.
Yep, exactly. So there was the Communications Decency Act, and that specifically, like Section 230 of that specifically lets platforms moderate without being held legally liable for what users post. So Facebook isn't in trouble just because I made a shitty post.
Yeah.
Just like Ford isn't responsible if I drive my truck through a crowd of people.
Right. And without that, sites like Facebook or Reddit or YouTube couldn't even exist in their current form. It is supposed to be an opportunity for you to state and share your opinion, for you to talk about what's going on in your life, for you to be confused and ask for help or get on your soapbox moment. It's for all of that, but they still have rules that you have to abide by even in those instances.
Yeah. And Callie, you have an interesting question here. Should private platforms act like neutral utilities? And to a certain degree, I think it would probably be advantageous for them and for society in the long run to. However, I don't think we as a society have the ability to dictate that they must. They have to elect to do so voluntarily.
Right.
Well, we have the capability of boycotting or
Sure.
not supporting.
Exactly.
That's where
Yeah.
it comes in.
Right. And that's the point exactly. Like you as the platform, I don't have to use you.
Right.
So I can go use a different platform if you do things. And that's exactly what we've seen with Truth Social, X, Blue Sky, all of these different platforms that have come about that are,
We're going to legislate this way.
yeah,
And they
we're going to
can.
have this bias or that bias, and they can do so. And in the long run, I think that's probably to their detriment, financially speaking, because
I
it makes
mean,
their platform less attractive to a broader audience.
yeah.
Or
I
to a
mean,
different audience.
look at how many users fled X after
Mhm.
everything came out with how Elon was going to manage it and what he wanted to do with all of that. It was, again, national news for months. All of these people fleeing, all of these companies coming out saying, we're not doing it. We're not going to be on there. You will not see us there. We're not
Yeah.
engaging or interacting with this at all. That is the power of we the people, right? We're choosing to forego the platform that you've created or that you've put here for us because we don't want any part of that.
And I think that there's something to be said there as well, that I'm pretty sure some of those numbers have come back
Sure.
to say, hey, okay, maybe this platform does work better than something else. Maybe it's better to not be in an echo chamber. Maybe it's okay to be somewhere where people can disagree with me.
In the case of social media platforms, Cole, do you think that they have a duty to moderate for safety and truth?
Duty is an interesting term there. I don't think they have a duty. No. I think that if they want to be the best product, that they should. So maybe they have like a responsibility to their shareholders to moderate for truth. The tricky part is how do you determine that? Who is their said arbiter of truth?
Right.
Yeah.
How do you do that without bias? Can you? And if you can't, then maybe not.
Is there a level, though, of what is so far-fetched versus what is
I mean, there are
nebulous?
hundreds of thousands of hours of flat earth content on YouTube. Should we take it down?
And I think that's my point is, should there be should there be levels of truth that are moderated and those that are outlandish or crazy, just we eliminate that? I mean,
Who gets to
do you
decide,
do a little bit or
though?
none at all?
What would Facebook be without all of these ridiculous stories about everything? I saw
I
one
might
this week.
actually see a friend of mine on there instead of crap I
Yep.
don't want to see.
Yep.
So,
I saw a
I mean,
story this
just
week
like you
talking
do,
about,
don't use Facebook
Don't
because
use
it's an
Facebook.
inferior product for you.
Very definitely.
yeah.
Just remember, Instagram is owned by them. It's the same thing.
all the
Touche.
same.
I told y'all starting this out after we talked about social media last week and how much mine was up 60% this week to, what did I tell you, Callie? 2.5 hours.
Something like that, yeah.
So I'm not using any of them very much.
You're not using any of them very much, but you're also supposed to be trying to use them less, so get to work.
I know. I can't believe I went up 60% when I'm supposed to be trying to use them less. By the way, we all failed on our,
Monday, social media free.
yeah.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
So,
Working on it. I'm working on it.
but after y'all mentioned that, I did think about it every time I opened one of those apps
Every
this week, and I
That's
was
what
like,
Callie said.
I shouldn't be here.
Yes.
I should go do something else. I don't
I
think
said
that
the
helped. I
exact
didn't
same thing.
really check my usage this week because,
Yeah.
again, it's not something that I monitor regularly, but I did think about it pretty much every time. Now, I want to get onto something different here, though, because, and I think we may have talked about this a little bit in a previous episode. We definitely talked about it off camera, but you've got a bullet point here about misinformation, hate speech. And the one I really want to key in on here is AI generated propaganda,
Mm-hmm.
because we're getting to a point where it's pretty concerning, the capability of these AI generated clips or videos,
Yeah.
the potential for deep fakes, if you will, that are getting pretty hard to distinguish from reality. How do we as a society protect against that?
You know, I hate saying this because it makes me sound very Democrat, but I would love to see legislation that requires that it's identified as AI generated.
I don't think that makes you sound very Democrat.
It's more law, more legislation.
Yeah, but sometimes regulation, carefully regulated. It can't just be this weird
Regulated.
Yeah.
blanket thing that doesn't really address the issue, that just looks like it does. It
Yeah.
needs to be a carefully crafted legislation to say, we have to leave enough space to utilize this new tool for things like making art, generating content.
But even if you're doing it for art or content, it could still be noted that AI was used.
Yeah. And I don't know that that necessarily detracts from the
No, it's just a
content that
different
you're
class.
creating.
Yeah.
I think culturally right now it does. And I think that that is probably where hesitancy in these AI generation manufacturers, these companies that are creating and building these AIs, I think there is some hesitancy there because culturally speaking, I think they've gotten some backlash for the use of their products. I don't necessarily think that that should be the case, because here's the thing. If I can do the job of 10 people better than those 10 people can do their job, who cares what tools I use, as long as I'm not
I mean,
going
those
in
10
and
people do.
intentionally harming someone else. Making a better product is not me harming someone. Like, sorry. Like, sorry, voice actors, sorry, actors, sorry, musicians. If I can make a better product than you, if I'm a better singer than you, I'm not harming you intentionally. I'm just better at it than you. If I can use a computer to make a better song than you can, I'm not harming you. Learn how to use a computer. Make a better song. Be that competition. But I also think that, Mom, I think that you make what is probably a really valid and important point, is that there has to be some sort of metadata attached to these things to say this is not real.
And I think that because there's so much deception, you know, I had a conversation earlier this week because we had talked about how much interference had been involved in the prior elections. And the person that I was talking to said there wasn't any Russian involvement. They didn't do anything. And I was like, really? And so you yourself, Cole, have talked about 80% of the internet is fake.
Yeah,
Are
that's the dead
bot
internet
generated.
theory.
Huh?
That's the dead internet theory. There is a theory that up to 80% of all interactions online are with bots.
And if you don't know, I mean,
Yeah,
it
but I
would
don't even
prevent.
think that that's something that you can legislate, because even if we write a law here in the United States that you have to verify your identity to participate in online forums, that doesn't mean other countries have those same laws. It doesn't prevent them from creating
True.
bots. It doesn't prevent them from getting fake verification. Makes it harder potentially.
I don't know. It kind of all rolls up.
Yeah, there's a streamer that I listen to who thinks that basically in the course of the next 15 to 20 years, the internet will stop being global. It will be regional.
Really?
Kind of like
Why?
how it is in China right now. Well, because you
Is that
can't
from
regulate
restrictions?
something that's global. You can't regulate it. You can't, like the US can't regulate the internet in Europe.
Right.
China can't regulate the internet in the US. So he thinks that very likely that we'll probably be, at least regulatorily speaking, moving towards more regional internets as opposed to a global one.
I wonder how much of that will stop things like Russian involvement. Because, like you say, if you go through a filter, if you do it through a bot, will it change anything? Just make it look safer?
It'll make it easier to control.
It's easier to control is always the option. Always the answer.
I'm not saying
That
it's a
doesn't
good
sound like
thing.
Cole, does it?
Again, I'm not agreeing with this or saying, and neither is the streamer that I'm referring to. They're not saying that this is a good thing or what we want to happen, but it is what they expect to happen. And I think there's probably some validity to that.
I just wonder if it would affect what we were talking about. Is that going to change hate speech any at all?
Depends on which region you're in. It might.
And how are
Depends
those
on
regions defined and drawn, and who draws
Yeah.
the line, and who gets to pull the puppet strings and figure out what the line
Yeah.
is and make all of those rules? Like,
the same people who are drawing
scary.
all of the imaginary lines right now.
It doesn't make it any less scary.
Nope.
If anything, it's
Makes
more.
it more scary, if anything.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. I'm going to land the plane on free speech. We need to remember that freedom of speech is essential, but it is not limitless. It is not free of accountability. It is not free of consequences. That is not what it is. It is freedom of persecution between you and the government. We need to hold space for ideas that are uncomfortable so that we can all learn and we can all grow. But with that space, we need to make sure that there is room for accountability and empathy. I think it's really, really important. I didn't know that. Thank you for teaching me, not just persecuting somebody for how stupid they are. We need to remember that speech in general is a tool. It can be used in a number of ways. It can be used to empower someone, or it can be used to endanger them. Use it wisely. And then the challenge with all of this is balancing that openness with responsibility. Because again, it's a tool. Choose wisely.
Your free
Words
speech
are so
doesn't
valuable.
trump mine.
Yes.
Interesting conversation with y'all.
Yeah. Mom, you got a weird thought for us this week?
I do, because this one just kind of cracked me up. This came from the New York Times, and I feel like we've kind of regressed a little bit, but the conversation was that when your social media is so full of ads that you can't find what you want, or it's, maybe you can't produce the people that you want to see your ad can't see your ad, that they're to flyers to be posted in your neighborhood, on the telephone pole. This isn't just, hey, I lost my cat. This is what he looks like. Call this number. This is a lot different. I mean, to me, it's an old school idea, and they're trying to maybe attract people in their neighborhood to a party, or maybe you're promoting your side hustle, or there was one lady who was even putting them up, hey, come read my new book. But they're printing flyers, going to the print shop and having flyers printed, and then they're walking their neighborhood to post them so that people in their neck of the woods can see them and respond to them. They might have a QR code on them. Some of them are very internet kind of looking,
Meme-ish.
yet I'm sorry,
Meme-ish.
meme-ish, but they're on paper. They're tactile and ready for you to respond to them in some way. Cole laughed because one of the questions was, are you a fermented art hoe? And all that was doing was directing them to her newsletter, to get them to read her newsletter. Since we had talked about touching grass last week, there's one about, hey, stop and touch the grass. And it links really to a guy who has a whole Instagram, and that's what he's doing, is stopping to touch grass. But the idea is that you'll make friends more locally
In your community?
and connect with people, which, we know that that's kind of an issue right now with people feeling isolated. And so they're using flyers to connect to their local community. I just think it's very interesting and kind of weird that we're kind of moving backwards on some things.
Because
to
we are
get-
so inundated with slop
Yes.
on the internet in general, this place that we're supposed to be moving everything digital so that we could save the planet and stop killing all the trees. But because we can no longer communicate through this medium, because it is so, again,
Massive.
inundated with slop, we're now having to go back and not even use it for what it's intended for.
Yeah.
But,
I
I saw something in relation to this week or the week before, where apparently there's been an update that has come out and hit Samsung refrigerators that now your refrigerator, your screen that's in your kitchen is now playing you ads.
Oh, God.
I mean,
But at the
guys,
same time,
can we cool it with the ads? Like,
yeah,
are they really creating that much of a return?
I mean, they
They're
obviously are.
everywhere.
But at the same time, can you imagine walking through your neighborhood and seeing somebody putting up a flyer about a book that you're like, huh, that sounds interesting. Hey, really quick. So, author, somebody who is excited about this book,
Yeah.
let's talk about this really quick. Tell me about it. You
Yeah.
know, Mom, you talked about earlier about putting notes on things about whether or not it's AI. If you're willing to get up and go post a flyer and have a conversation about it, it obviously matters enough. I think that's so fascinating.
I mean, it's a really interesting thought.
Yeah.
What would neighborhoods be like?
I'd be interested to see maybe a case study on ad revenue per user per time frame. So, because honestly, I think at this point, it would not shock me at all if a lot of these subscription services that have a free with ads are losing money on the ad side, and they are just flooding it with ads to push people into the monthly subscription. Because I'm more than happy to pay for YouTube, whatever it is, to get ad-free YouTube or ad-free Hulu or ad-free Netflix. Like, yeah, I'll pay the extra whatever it is a month.
I
Get me
did
out
read
of
an
here.
article about that, about podcast ads, that they were finding out that they just weren't paying for, that there just wasn't enough return on these podcasts, that they've backed off of using them.
Same for a lot of streamers, because again, this kind of going back to that dead internet theory where view botting is seriously a thing, where a lot of these viewer counts that people are getting aren't real.
Yeah.
I mean, there was a purge a few months ago on, I think it was like Twitch, of basically bot accounts, and some of their biggest streamers had their viewer counts cut in half,
Oh, gosh.
cut by 60 or 70%. Like massive, massive drops in viewership because of this purge. And they had to do it because advertisers are like, look, we know that like, we're not seeing the return. We know these are fake. You have to do something about this
Yeah.
or we're going to leave.
Yeah. Authenticity matters.
Let me ask y'all a question, because they talked about putting QR codes on these flyers, but I don't do QR codes that I don't know. Is that just me being
Probably
neurotic, or would
wise.
y'all just hit a QR code? Because
I
the
think it
flyer,
depends on the QR code.
Yeah, I'm probably
I'm
not going to hit
sitting
a
at a
QR code
restaurant-
on at a restaurant on their menu. Probably not going to worry too much about that one.
but a flyer hanging up
But
on
a
a telephone pole?
Flyer hanging up on a telephone pole, yeah, I'm probably going to be like, yeah, I don't know, man.
But what's it a flyer for? Like,
Doesn't matter.
I think that it does to me a little bit. Again, if
I
I
don't think
sat there
so.
and talked to the person who was putting it up and they're all excited about this book and can tell me things about it, that would be one thing. I'm more
don't know.
inclined to scan that QR code.
No, I don't think so.
That could
Okay, I have
still
to
be social engineering.
I
have
mean,
to
it
tell y'all a
could.
funny. So apparently the state was made aware of some phishing emails this week, and everybody in the state sent me an email about it saying, hey, be aware of this. But the one that really cracked me up was the person from the state who attached it, made it an attachment, not in the body of his email, but made it an attachment to be aware. And I'm like, are you really serious? You think you're going to email me about phishing and you want me to open an attachment, and I don't know who you are? The state has received these, so the state is telling you to beware. But
Of
the
this thing that
state,
we just attached to this email.
yes. I was like,
You are actively emailing me malware. Thanks.
yes. Yes. And if I hadn't received it from 10 other people, maybe it wouldn't have been as funny who had it in the body of their email saying, be aware of this, but not an attachment.
Weird. Weird.
Okay, give me a good story. Who's got it?
I've got it. I've got a good news story. So back in August, In the rural Pennsylvania town of Greenville, a 16-year-old girl named Lindsay Leskovac was driving home after she dropped her friend off. On her drive home, she got sleepy. Despite her best efforts, she actually drifted off behind the wheel. Her truck left the roadway, collided with 2 poles and a couple of trees, and came to a stop dangerously close to a body of water. As she's trapped in this wreck, she was unable to call for help. But here's where things take a technologically remarkable turn. Her iPhone 14 had a feature on it called crash detection that automatically dialed 911. Her mom, Laura, later explained that the dispatcher's voice coming through her phone woke Lindsay up just enough so that she could respond, and she stayed on the line with the dispatcher for 22 minutes while help was on the way. Thanks to the automated rescue call, emergency responders were able to locate her, get
Oh
her
my gosh.
out of all of this mess. She suffered some really serious injuries, including fractures to her spine, her neck, her hips, and both legs. Yet, it was likely the feature that made the difference between a tragic outcome and her survival. Her mom says that they're deeply grateful, and now they are working to raise awareness about 2 things: the dangers of drowsy driving and how to make sure that crash detection or emergency SOS features on your smartphone are enabled so that you have an extra layer of protection like that of the one that likely saved Lindsay's life.
Okay, you were getting really close to me going, where's the good news part of that? But I don't know that my phone has a crash detector on it.
It does.
Holy cow.
It does.
I'll have to look and find that.
Yeah, it does. I will grab a couple of, like, an Android, I don't know if there's one, but an Android and an iPhone version to link to the show notes to show you how to put those on, because it's pretty cool.
So technology saved her life.
Oh, man, that's a pretty hard swing. It's the spectrum of potential on something like that is so broad. I mean,
Mhm.
this is obviously an incredible and heartwarming and really just outstanding use case for technology like that. But I think that there are also some arguments that could be made for technology like that being extremely concerning about
Like
There
what?
an invasion of privacy.
There was
I
a
was
big,
wondering about the
huge
tracking.
deal. Yeah,
Yeah.
there was a big, huge deal when these features first came out that people were on rides at amusement parks. And so as they're taking these big dips or things, their phones would set them off, and they had
I
to
remember
address
that.
that and go back and say, hey, this can't happen in this instance. It has to be different. So it all had to be coded differently to make sure that it was only like more accurate things. Like, we certainly don't want to be bogging down 911 resources with fake calls because you're on an amusement park ride, or because you
Yeah.
dropped your phone all of a sudden and it's detected a crash because it fell out of your pocket. And so the engineers have gone back in and coded all of those things to be really cautious. But yeah, Cole, I think that there are certainly some privacy concerns at play.
Yeah, I mean, because kind of like what we're talking about. Yeah, you have this freedom of speech, but that's not freedom from consequence. There's some crazy people out there, and doxing is a thing, and doxing is extremely dangerous.
Yeah.
And you know what? Even I see
Explain what
people do it all the
doxing is for
time.
mom.
So essentially, getting someone's data, being able to locate them, to say, I know who, like, it is essentially taking away anonymity on the internet. And like, I see it being used as a weapon, both for good and for bad. And it's really concerning. Like, there are people who are going out and identifying child predators, who are identifying these people who have said something really bad online. And they are essentially de-anonymizing people. But that's because what happens when you disagree with me? Now you're putting me in danger just because I think differently than you. So there's some really positive potential and some really negative potential on both sides of that.
So tell me where the link for her crash and doxing is in your mind. Is
It
that
called
because
911 and told them where she was.
It
What
didn't
if somebody
call
can
some random high school kid and tell them where she was. It called
Okay, I'm catching up.
911 resources.
Right, but the
But you think
phone
it could
knows
call?
where she is. So, and I'm not saying that this app is, but the phone has that information. And if someone else gains access to that, that could be potentially dangerous. Let's say I come out and I say, I think that what mom has said is the stupidest thing ever, and she's an absolute moron. And you have this rabid following of fans who are violent,
No.
and one of them gets a hold of my information and they come and burn my house down while with me in it.
And I see where you're going. Well, what a way to ruin a good story.
Sorry, it's just what came. It was kind of my follow-up weird thought. I think it's fantastic. And that's like the hardest part for me is there's so much obvious benefit to a tool like
Yeah.
that, but there's also some
How do you
concern for me
control
on
it?
something like that. Yeah, how do you
Who has that?
We were
how do you
talking
secure something like that?
we
Yeah.
were talking this week at work about the difference between the bleeding edge and the cutting edge. Think of technology. And so in many ways, I think that the bleeding edge is really painful, and I hope that that has already been addressed. So that
Define
when
that for me. What's the bleeding edge?
think
Right.
of what?
Right where you can't decide if it's good technology or bad technology?
In the process of deciding, in the process of making it safe and user-friendly and usable and predictable and all of these things would be
Yeah.
the bleeding edge. People are going to get hurt in that process.
Bleeding edge refers to technology that is further ahead than cutting edge or leading edge technology. It is technology that is so new and advanced that it is still unproven, could carry risks, and may not perform as intended.
AI.
Yeah. Some forms of AI, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And just knowing the difference between the bleeding edge, where it's painful and really hard to get to the cutting edge. You have to go through the bleeding edge before you can get to the cutting edge.
Well, that's a new term for me.
It was fascinating.
I wonder if that's a podcast.
Oh, interesting. Maybe so.
Try not to let Cole ruin our good news stories.
I mean,
I'm not trying to ruin the story.
Lindsay Leskovac isn't going to let Cole ruin it. So,
Okay, good. No, and her mama isn't either. I'm just
Yeah,
telling you, her
they're
mama's going to
just-
take that and make sure it's on every phone for the rest of her
Yeah.
life.
too busy being grateful over here.
Yeah.
I get it.
It's pretty amazing, though, that even when she couldn't respond, there was something there to help her. Wild. We live in a fascinating, sometimes scary world.
Precedented times.
Yes.
Yeah. I hope we're ready for it. I hope we can
I
survive
don't
it.
know that we can ever be ready for it. I think the best we can do is hold on.
Okay.
Touch the ground.
I'm going to keep loving you guys because that's the best I can do.
Me
I
too.
love you too.
And keep asking you questions, even if you tell somebody that I'm a moron, Cole.
I would never.
And all of my fans come after you. All 3 of them.
Come get some.
Love you guys.
Love you
Love you
guys.
too.